Just 30 years ago, scientists thought that some places on Earth were sterile. Life there was thought to be simply impossible, as it seemed to be absent from other planets.
There's very high toxicity right here. This here are sulfuric acid.
You can smell the hydrogen sulfide. For that is necessary to breathe with a tank and regulator.
However, some creatures, known as extremophiles, manage to develop in environments which are extremely hostile for most living creatures. In these environments, microorganisms are the kings. Some animals which live in darkness have strange adaptations, like totally white skin, and others are completely blind. To understand the secrets of evolution, scientists are studying how they manage to survive with so little oxygen, food, and light. In the four corners of the planet, in Europe, America, Oceania, and in Africa, we're going to discover these true hells. Movile Cave in Romania is surely the most extreme underground environment on the planet. Its isolation for many millions of years has led to the creation of a real microcosm. A drill bore in 1986 led Christian Lescu to the discovery of this underground cavity, hidden 30 meters beneath the earth.
And this is the third gate of the cave. It's just to protect the underground environment from the contamination from outside. It's a lid separating an atmosphere with normal content in oxygen and carbon dioxide, and that of the cave, which is quite poor in oxygen and is very rich in carbon dioxide.
I remember very clearly that moment after I penetrated through a tight passage. I felt like being an unusual environment. I felt first that it's very, very warm, and I felt the smell of hydrogen sulfide.
In some parts of the cave, hydrogen sulfate is 100 times more concentrated than in the air we breathe.
It's sort of caving I don't like so much, and it's more difficult because it's less oxygen here. Yeah?
Though the cave is a hell for human beings, other living creatures can live in it. The deeper one goes, the stranger become the creatures one meets.
I've seen many caves before in Romania, but never so many creatures moving around. It was like in a tropical forest or something like that. So that big question was where the food for these animals come from.
The further Christian Lescu and his team members penetrate into the cave, the more saturated with hydrogen becomes the air. A small underground lake bars their path. This is also the most difficult and dangerous part of the expedition. A siphon has to be crossed, going into this water which is strangely opaque. But it's this sheet of water which is the key to the mystery.
You can smell the hydrogen sulfide, like rotten eggs smell, and the content in oxygen from this lake till the last bell, it becomes lower and lower, and for that is necessary to breathe with a tank and regulator.
This unclear water is in fact covered with a layer of mucus known as biofilm, the starting point for life. An ecosystem is born, starting with a chemical reaction between the water, the microbes, and the hydrogen sulfate found in the cave.
Movile ecosystem is a pyramid. At the base, there is the organic matter, the biofilm produced by microbes, being, let's say, the equivalent of the grass at the surface. Next, there are the grazers, the primary consumers, like isopod, collembola, or small worms, living in this mat, eating it. And they are like rabbits, let's say, at surface. On the top of the pyramid, there are the predators, like nepa, big spiders, centipedes, which are the equivalent of wolves or foxes on the surface.
As on the surface, scavengers are found. Waste and dead bodies are recovered by the mollusks. They play the role of garbage collectors. The biofilm is in this way a real loam of life in this demonic universe. Christian has been asking himself for a while if other biofilms exist nearby. And when going back to the surface, it's in a sulfurous pool near the cave that he finds the answer.
Could be a good place to look at the specific ecosystem here. Yeah? What do you think? This organic matter is a mixture of fungus, algae and bacteria. It's very similar with that we have in Movile, but the difference here, there is not only the energy produced by chemical reaction, but also the sun energy.
Thanks to this layer of mucus, all the organisms are in touch with each other, which creates the best possible survival system. Although of course no fish can live in this overly sulfurous water, microfauna similar to Movile's has developed. Thanks to the sun's rays, it's clearly more varied and richer. The very first living organisms doubtless nourished themselves in the same manner. But where does the water in the cave come from when it rains rarely in the southeast of Romania?
We realized that the water doesn't come from the surface and doesn't come because all the limestone are sealed with very fine clay, but it comes from deep springs, could be 1,000 meters, and is not contaminated with any kind of life forms. The question is how these animals inhabited the underground ecosystem. 6 million years ago, the climate was humid and warm, but later, a big dramatic climatic change. The cave was probably open, so some of them found a refugee because they found the same condition they lost at the surface. Humidity, 100%, and 21-degree temperature.
The animals of this prehistoric Noah's Ark had to adapt to this hostile environment. With no sun, their pigmentation disappeared. Some are so transparent that their internal organs can be seen at work. Others have become blind, like this spider and this nepa that are found in no other place. It seems, however, possible to see traces of eye sockets. But the electronic microscope confirms that the organ itself has completely gone. Not like this other Nepa, which is also a cave dweller that still has its eyes. Its double rostrum is like a prehistoric weapon. One has small teeth to hold the prey. The other is for swallowing the insides of the victim, as if sucking through a straw. To hunt, the Nepa uses a respiratory tube which allows it to get the small amount of air available and to stay afterwards for long periods in the water. Small snails are easy prey, but another Nepa wants to have a part of the feast. The fight begins and finally concludes by mating. Christian has spotted two other Nepas fighting over a centipede. The struggle for survival is the main occupation of the inhabitants of this lost world. A third Nepa has joined in to rip apart the prey. The spider operates on the same hunting ground as the Nepas. This one has just come out of the sticky biofilm, and its hairs are stuck down. These hairs, which are sensitive to the slightest movement in the air, allow it to find its prey. With the help of these impressive hooks, all that's left to do is to grab it. In the Movile cave, evolution sometimes takes strange turns, as when some blind spiders are born with eyes and then lose them. This is in fact the case of the spider Lascona christiani, which is named after Christian.
Is the famous spider Lascona christiani, is a typical Movile species. In Movile cave live 35 new species. Half of them terrestrial, half aquatic.
The new species found at Movile are mainly large invertebrates, like this leech, which owes its survival to the proliferation of the micro-inhabitants of the biofilm. Christian is sure he will be able to identify still more new microscopic species in this loam of life. Few scientists have had the chance to observe the living biofilm. Although these microorganisms are particularly resistant within their own space, they become very fragile once outside their natural environment and die quickly beneath a microscope lens. That's what has happened to this Icarian. Its death is good news for these worms and this red protozoa, which are usually on its menu. 10 times thinner than a hair, the Icarian is all the same a giant predator in the micro-zoo of the biofilm. This protozoa is twisting strangely between the algae and the worms. It is trying to catch, thanks to its lashes, a maximum number of bacteria and fungi, a little like a whale tries to catch plankton. This minuscule protozoa does the same as does this gigantic nematode worm. In a teaspoon full of biofilm, more than 30,000 nematode worms are swimming, and that population can double in the space of 2 days. This should rapidly become invasive. However, its expansion seems to be limited. Christian asked himself what could be the cause of this limit for a long time, until he managed to record this sequence of predation. The young nematode worms are swallowed by this small copepod. The copepod is devoured by this little prawn, who is then eaten by this leech. Thus is the chain of life in Movile. This ecosystem is so unusual that its discovery has made the front cover of many international magazines.
Movile is so famous and inspired a lot of Hollywood stories. But there are this kind of Dracula-style stories where the bacteria were replaced with vampires.
The invertebrates are the only monsters of the lost world of Movile. Do other caves exist in the world which are as inhospitable and peopled by such large creatures? The answer is to be found in Mexico, in another little underground microbe paradise. To find this Eden, hard to lose your way, just follow the little stream which is white to the point of being almost opaque, where all the same a rather curious fish lives.
We're about a kilometer away and you can already smell the sulfur from the cave. It smells like rotten eggs. Welcome to paradise.
Dr. Michael Tobler has been studying the Extremophile fish from the Villa Luz cave for 10 years. It's also widely known as the Cueva de las Sardinas, or the Sardine Cave. The singular thing about the river is that it has a very high concentration of hydrogen sulfate, which comes from the geysers in this cave. The sulfur springs deposit high doses of sulfur on the wall of the cave. The sulfur is eaten by minuscule acidophile bacteria, which accumulate by their billions in the form of mucus stalactites called snottites. The cave has a kind of cold.
The Cueva de la Sulfur here is very similar as the Movile cave in Romania, in that it is very toxic, but unlike the Movile cave, the cave here is not a closed system. Nonetheless, all organisms that live here need to have special adaptations to deal with the toxicity of the cave. Some bacteria use chemosynthesis to produce organic matter. It's a process very similar to plants on land, whereas plants use sunlight and carbon dioxide to produce organic matter.
At the cave mouth, the air can be breathed. And many insects seem to feed here from the organic material that springs from the microbial carpet of the cave. This is where the spiders await, with webs woven between the sticky stalactites. Unlike what can be seen at Movile, these spider species have eyes. Some have even 8 or 6 or 4, because here they don't have a lot of light to play with.
Here we're actually in one of the front chambers of the cave, and you can see there's about 25 holes in the ceiling. These are called skylights. As we go deeper, there will be more hydrogen sulfide in the air, which is toxic, and that's why we're going to put on our gas mask. The bats living in here, it's not quite clear how they can survive in the cave. Some people think that survival for the bats is only possible because they live closely to the skylights that permit some fresh air to come into the cave. But there's also parts in the cave that do not have skylights, and nonetheless the bats are thriving in there.
The toxic gases drop because they are heavier than air. Michael Tobler thinks that the bats usually stay above this layer and only make brief incursions to capture insects. Their survival means they must not stay too long in the critical zone. The atmosphere of the cave means that animal bodies do not decompose. They remain stuck to the slippery, toxic-coated walls, mummified. As Michael Tobler and his assistant descend further and further into the depths, their legs seem to get heavier. Hydrogen sulfate is now at a critical level for life.
These here are snottites. At the tip, there's a drop of sulfuric acid. That's the byproduct of the bacteria's metabolism.
If the scientists don't protect their skin, they might be severely burned, because these drops are as acid as car battery acid. Michael Tobler will make an incredible discovery. On the snottites are living some nematode worms. This must be one of the reasons they attract so many insects. These little drops of acid, in falling, dissolve limestone and gypsum. This is why that strange blue-white color is found in the water of the stream.
So this is one of the sulfidic springs. This is where all sulfur in the cave originates, and this is basically where the food web starts.
In the entrails of the cave, the air has become completely unbreathable. The oxygen content is 4 times less than that of the air we breathe. However, creatures have made this their home.
So this is the most toxic part of the cave, and it's crazy. In this part of the cave, we actually find fish.
But how do they feed themselves?
These are the adults of the midgets. They live all over the cave in the sediment. And they're basically like the krill in the ocean. They eat the bacteria, the primary producer, and then themselves they are the prey items for most other organisms in the cave.
The blood of the fly larvae is rich in oxygen, thanks to the hemoglobin which gives it this red color. This diptera make up an abundant food source for the extremophile fish, Astonishing fasciatus. Michael Tobler will even find hundreds of fish in a sulfur spring. But if they can eat things, how do they breathe?
The fish here within the cave also have adaptations that allows them to cope with the toxicity of the hydrogen sulfide. For example, they rely on a behavior that is called aquatic surface respiration, where the fish breathe in the uppermost level of water, which is the most oxygen-rich part. To facilitate that, they also have enlarged gills, and they have physiological adaptations that allows them to detoxify hydrogen sulfide within the body. Cavefish also have more elaborate non-visual senses. For example, the lateral line system, which allows the fish to sense vibration within the water, is much more elaborate in cavefish than in surface fish. So they can feel their way in darkness much better than a fish from the surface. Here you can see a cavefish right next to a surface fish. As you can see, the two fish differ in their eye size, whereas the cavefish have much smaller eyes than the surface fish. The two fish also differ in their coloration, and the cavefish is much paler than the surface fish.
For the first time, Michael Tobler is going to experiment to see if the surface Astyanax fasciatus can live in the hell of the cave, and if the cave fish can survive on the surface in the stream.
The fish from sulfidic water actually will die if we rapidly transfer them into normal water without sulfide and high oxygen. However, if we acclimatize the fish slowly to the freshwater conditions, they are perfectly able to survive. The opposite, however, is not true. If we take a fish from regular fresh water and we slowly try to acclimatize it to the sulfidic condition, it will die nonetheless. That is because these fish lack the adaptations to deal with the toxic effects of this substance.
But their adaptation to surface breathing makes these fish easy prey for the giant water bug called Belostoma.
Cavefish are adapted to get oxygen at the water surface, but it's exactly where the Belostoma are waiting for the cavefish and are actually attacking them and eating them, as you can see here. It's very unusual that a bug is actually the main predator of a fish within an ecosystem. In other places on Earth, insects may prey on vertebrates occasionally, but it's unique to this system that the bug is the main predator.
Its bite is considered to be one of the most venomous and painful that an insect can deliver. It injects saliva that liquefies muscle tissue, then it sucks out the content.
The bugs mainly eat big fish and male fish, but we don't think it's an active choice by the bug. We think that big fish and males have higher oxygen requirement. So they will be spending more time at the water surface breathing. They are exposing themselves to the predator more often than smaller fish and females do.
It's a blessing for the water bug that the fish come to the surface, because unlike the Movile nepa, the bug doesn't have a long tube to be able to stay hidden for a long time below the surface of the water. The fact that it stays mainly on the surface is an advantage for protecting its eggs from eventual predators. It's the male that makes sure that they're protected by carrying them on its back. As they grow, the young bugs change their skin. Their old skin feeds the red flatworm. It's the garbage collector of this ecosystem. Armed with a giant digestive tract, it collects all the waste. There remain many enigmas in Vila-Luz, but for the descendants of the Zocs, the inhabitants of the region, this stream and this cave are sacred. For generations, the Zocs have repeated the same gestures and the same rituals just before the Easter festival. Used for fishing, these barbasco roots are highly toxic. When food became scarce, the old inhabitants used to harvest the fish, which were abundant in the cave. It was the gift of the shadows before becoming the gift of God.
In the name of the gods and of our mother, the earth, in the name of the sun and the moon, allow us to enter the cave to seek our food.
The fishing is done in the first part of the cave, according to the same ritual, by candlelight.
We bless here the 4 cardinal points: east, north, south, and west, to purify the air that some of us consider highly contaminated.
The root mixture dissolves in the water, asphyxiates the fish and kills them.
Japanese scientists came to tell the town officials that we shouldn't go into the cave anymore because there were 6 different kinds of gas, like oxygen, carbon monoxide, and sulfur, and that it was dangerous for us.
For the Zocs, it's a blessed place which is swarming with fish. It's just a matter of filling the baskets, and once the fish is dried, it loses its sulfurous taste. But do they know that they owe this miraculous catch to a unique ecosystem which all begins with this pile of Extremophile bacteria? In some New Zealand caves, strange threads hang by their thousands. But here, they aren't accumulations of bacteria like in the Vila-Luz cave. Dr. Ian Stringer has been studying them for many years.
Look at that, Corin, just like stars, everywhere. But that's a dangerous light trap.
These traps are in a sense fishing lines for the cave-dwelling glowworms.
Glowworms are not an extremophile, but using light to attract insects is a good strategy for caves because there's not very much food in there, and they get the insects that hatch from water that's drawn into the cave through the rivers.
All the glowworm has to do is to move up to its prey, trapped on the silken thread.
Here's a mayfly that's just been caught, still alive. And look at all the larvae around here. They're, 3 or 4 centimetres long. There's more food there, more food.
The glowworm isn't really a worm, but actually a fly larva. This larva has only one aim: to eat as much as possible to get the protein necessary to change into a nymph.
This is a female pupa. They sometimes glow. They take 12 to 15 days before they hatch into a little fly.
Very often, this little fly gets caught in its own trap.
In the cave, you can get up to 100 glowworms per square metre. They separate out and they keep a little space around each other because they're cannibals and they'll eat each other if they get too close.
Each glowworm has therefore its own territory. For a long time, the way these silk thread traps worked was a mystery. Collecting them was already a particularly delicate task because they are very sticky.
These are the droplets of glue on the fishing line, a bit like a spider's web.
These shining droplets are in fact balls of glue. Often, the spiders in the cave share the same zones as the glowworm. They make use of the light of the worms to catch their own prey. In exchange, the spiders protect the glowworms. Sometimes the threads of silk get mixed up, and the glowworm finishes up in the spider's larder. The glowworm's light reflects all the way down the silk thread. It's caused by a chemical reaction made by the contact of the waste it expels with oxygen.
Here is the head of the larva. This is its gut. And here at the other end is the light organ with a bright white reflector on top. The organ of glowworms that produces the cold light, excretory organs, there's 4 of them. They run from the gut to the end of the insect, and it's the blind ends that produce the light, 4 of them. They have a big reflector on top to make the light shine downwards.
This curious cricket, the weta, lives in the glowworm caves of New Zealand. Unfortunately for the weta, it has no other way of attracting its prey.
The cave weta could be the only insect in the world that lives and breeds inside the cave but has to come out at night to feed. Cave weta typically avoid any kind of light. They won't even come out of the cave if the moon is too bright.
This night, Lorraine is in luck. The wetas are up despite the veiled moon and the rain. Thanks to an infrared system, the insects are visible, and the wetas can be seen feeding on vegetation and dead insects. They are the only species of cave-dwelling insect to have adopted this original system. There are a lot of weta caves, but they're often very difficult to reach. Lorraine Cook is used to this. It's her job to count the populations because the species is becoming more and more rare.
This is a good weta cave. There's all these weta droppings here. Lots of it. It's dark and cold and damp. Oh, and here's some up here. And there's a lot more down here, all on the wall here, and up on the roof. Yes, I'd like to catch one of these. Oh, I've got two. Cave weta have developed these great big long legs and really long antennae which they wave around in the cave to find out where they are because they can't see anything. They also have these really long mouth parts that they use to feel what's in front of them. These cave weta here are quite big, especially this adult male here, but they can actually grow a lot bigger than this. Some of these cave weta have been recorded at 45 centimetres long, and so that's from the tip of their antennae to the back of their hind leg. That's huge. So in fact, cave wetas are one of the largest insects in the world.
These wetas spend most of their time totally immobile and in peace, but they do sometimes become aggressive.
This male cave weta here looks like it's got something wrong with its leg, perhaps it's broken. Male cave weta are known to fight sometimes. It's thought it's over competition for mates, but this cave weta will survive quite happily without this leg if it falls off, because cave weta are also known to eat their own legs when they get hungry and there's nothing else to eat. The cave weta is like a prehistoric insect, which means it's relatively unchanged for millions and millions of years. It looks exactly the same now as it did millions of years ago.
At the time of the dinosaurs, its distant ancestors lived outside, like the forest weta, that can still be spotted if you have good eyes, camouflaged in thorny trees.
Oh, he's angry.
The giant weta is much bigger than the forest weta. It's the size of a human hand and weighs more than a small bird. This weta doesn't need to take refuge in the caves to find warmth because it's a real cold extremophile. It can, in effect, freeze and unfreeze over 6 months, as these images show. This mysterious ability to resist the frost, which usually destroys cells in most kinds of animals, is presently being studied. Like the wetas, the spiders, and the glowworms, or the fish, a curious amphibian has found refuge in the caves of Central Europe.
Before this animal was scientifically described, the local people knew for this animal because some springs were bringing it out of the caves, and they thought it was the baby of the dragon.
Professor Boris Sket is one of the leading Proteus specialists. To observe it, he scours the most impressive karstic caves of Slovenia with his team. These mysterious creatures only live in these limestone caves and in some others found in neighboring countries, but nowhere else in the world.
So we will search here for Proteus, Stanislav.
Yes.
Okay. You see?
Oh, yes.
You see it there?
Right.
So. We can say that in some sense Proteus is extremophile. It's able to support lack of food. It can live for months without any food, maybe even for many years. Of course, it will use its tissues, it will survive.
Its secret is to be found in this immense organ, its liver, where it stores food in the form of lipids and glycogen, a kind of superfuel. It reduces its activity to function in slow-down mode. This isn't hibernation because it can take up normal fast activity almost immediately. In order to feed, it is capable of detecting very small amounts of organic composants. Its inner ear allows it to perceive sound waves. To breathe, the Proteus has outsized external gills situated behind its head. Their red color is due to the presence of blood enriched with oxygen. It can go for up to a quarter of an hour without air.
Everything what is not necessary is being reduced to economize the use of this scarce food. And maybe also it doesn't need 5 fingers. This is a case of reduction. Like the eyes got reduced, like pigmentation got reduced.
All these adaptations, these strategies, have allowed life to grow in extreme conditions. The species we have seen practice amongst themselves permanent exchanges. A remarkable balance, very fragile and often unimaginable, comes from that.
That cave is dark, is hot, is sulfuric acid. It's not a hell because the creatures have an unlimited source of food.
The fish in this system are at the very initial stage of speciation.